Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today we're going to be looking at a Ronald Reagan versus FDR election video. And the way that I'm going to be doing this one, I'm just going to tell you how it is. FDR is going to win this video because I'm doing it based off of second term state-by-state comparison. Now, I was originally going to do this based off my own prediction, and I know a lot of you are going to be mad about this. So tomorrow I'm going to do it based off my own prediction. Today I'm going to be doing it based off a state-by-state analysis, mainly because I was very conflicted over a number of states. That electoral map is going to look so horrible. Even though we are in the current climate, there are some states that a lot of you guys do think could go to either FDR or Ronald Reagan that may not be possible in this type of climate. Even if they are these type of candidates, it doesn't necessarily mean that these staunch Democrats aren't going to be too inclined to vote for someone like Ronald Reagan, or these hardcore Republicans in the Deep South are going to be inclined to vote for FDR, even though they may have in the past. And, just looking at the overall climate of today, a lot of these states may end up actually staying the same, but the margins are what matters too. And I do think that a lot more thinking is going to need to go into this video rather than, what I could conjure up in like an hour or so. And I get it. It's not that serious. I just think that this is two top names that really haven't been discussed in a while in terms of matchups. So I think I'm going to push it off until tomorrow. But today's going to be a state-by-state analysis. If you don't know what that means, essentially I'm going to be taking the percentage that FDR won in certain states versus the percentage that Ronald Reagan won in certain states. And that's why I'm saying you already know that FDR is going to win, considering if you look at his second term, he won every state except for two. Yes, Ronald Reagan won every state except for one. But if we're looking at the margins there, it was definitely a bigger win for FDR nationwide in terms of the popular vote percentages and state-by-state vote. But we're going to start off with all the states that were won by a safe margin. So this is going to be, again, a very ugly map, and this isn't even my own prediction. This is probably going to be uglier than my own prediction just because, again, it's based off of 1932 stats versus 1936 stats versus 1984 stats. Again, they're still going to look pretty ugly. So the safe states for FDR are the states of Texas, that's funny, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. Now, if you don't see anything wrong with this map, I don't know what you're thinking. This is absolutely insane. We're never going to see these states safe Democratic in the immediate future unless there's no Republican candidate, and even then probably the Libertarian candidate would get at least like 15% of the vote there. But still, those are the safe FDR states. For the safe Reagan states, we have the states of Alaska and Hawaii because I couldn't compare them. So I guess that sucks for FDR, but it's going to go to Reagan. The state of New Hampshire, which I think is pretty interesting, state of Maine, and the state of Vermont. So that's just how it is. Again, those are pretty interesting because I would expect Alaska. I would not expect their other four states. Again, I did not expect any of those Democratic states to be safe Democrat whatsoever. And again, the names aren't exactly on here, but Ronald Reagan obviously is a Republican and FDR is the Democrat. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the states that FDR and Ronald Reagan would win by 10%, actually 5 to 10%. Sorry, my screen recorder cut out, but again, we're going to move over into the states that FDR won by 5 to 10%. So that, again, is not the safe states. We've already covered the safe states. We're moving over into the states that are 5 to 10% for FDR. Now, some of these states are reasonable. You can expect them to be going to FDR or any Democrat, really, by 5 to 10%, but some of them are definitely pushing it. So the first state that you can pretty much expect, Washington, that is a state that's expected to go to FDR by 5 to 10%, joined by the states of Wisconsin and Minnesota. I'm actually going to, I did not mean to do that. North Dakota, definitely not. Minnesota, we have here. Wisconsin, we have here. And those are the three states as of right now. I would say, actually, no. Virginia and Maryland are joined by them too. I think all five of those states you can pretty much expect to vote that way in 2020, depending on the candidates or any future election with a Democrat, because it is definitely possible in those states. Now, like I said before, there are some states where it's pushing it. So we've covered Washington, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Maryland, and Virginia. The state of North Carolina, we're probably not going to see that in the immediate future. Probably not in Florida. You could possibly expect that even if FDR did run, because he did, Social Security, everything, major issues that are important in the state of Florida. What's interesting is that the South is turning more into a Democratic area in this type of matchup, even though Ronald Reagan was loved everywhere. Tennessee going to the Democrats, putting them at 202. Joined by Montana, which I do think is pretty interesting. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 states here. And I believe, yes, I have 9 states on my list. So those are the only states that have been won by FDR by 5 to 10%. So again, it's pretty interesting seeing states like Tennessee and North Carolina and Florida in that column. But that's pretty much expected, considering that FDR was not mildly, drastically popular in the South. You know, you can expect that even though Ronald Reagan again was popular and he was a Republican, the South loved Democrats at this point, leading all the way up until like the end. Jimmy Carter was probably the last Democrat. Actually, Bill Clinton did win there, but not deep, deep South. And moving over into the states that Reagan won by 5 to 10%: Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas. That's it. Those 4 states. You can expect that because they are Republican states, but it's still the red wall. And it is the red wall. So again, you can expect that as well. But those 4 states only put Ronald Reagan at 35 electoral votes. Right now, FDR is at 205 electoral votes. So there's a big difference between the two. 170 electoral votes differentiate them. But I do think it is pretty interesting looking at a number of these areas where FDR is just doing phenomenal. Obviously, again, this is a statistics-based video. This is not my own opinion. I do not think FDR would win by such a large margin. These candidates are definitely equally matched in terms of, a presidential race. And yes, they are going to appeal to different areas, but they're still probably going to come up about even when it comes down to it. Now, moving over into the states that Ronald Reagan actually won by 5%. Let's go ahead and characterize those states. Idaho, you can expect that one's going to go, I guess this is what you would call the lean column. Idaho, Utah as well, joined by Colorado. It's around the general area. I guess Ronald Reagan did pretty well around that area. North Dakota, filling in the rest of the red wall with Oklahoma as well. Indiana, right there. And here's a surprising one: Delaware and Connecticut. So that puts Ronald Reagan at 85 electoral votes. Again, FDR is at 205 electoral votes. Now, if we're looking at this map, again, filling in the red wall, that's pretty much expected. We're not expecting anything else. Indiana as well, you can expect that. It's just Connecticut and Delaware that are throwing parts of the map off. And obviously that, blue in the South that we are not expecting whatsoever in any type of election, which is also pretty interesting to me. Overall, looking at this map, it is pretty similar to what we might see in a number of the areas. Obviously not the South, but if we're looking over in the Midwest or up across the red wall, Colorado may be blue, but Montana may be red or things like that. Wisconsin and Minnesota possibly could be blue. Indiana possibly could be red. We're expecting stuff like that. But obviously the map is not an exact representation of what we saw in 2016, 2012, 2008, etc. But let's move over to the states that FDR won by 1 to 5%, and there are a lot of them. The state of Oregon, you can expect that, again, Democratic state normally. The state of Nevada, another state that's a Democratic state, usually won by that margin, actually. Arizona, New Mexico, I think that's also pretty interesting that those states are going there, along with Illinois. I think that Illinois call is pretty interesting considering that's a pretty big state. So obviously it's going to have a big impact. And right now, FDR is 16 electoral votes away from being elected to his 5th term. But let's move on. We have other states. The states of West Virginia. I think that's pretty interesting as well. The state of Pennsylvania. So we have Pennsylvania, West Virginia, New York, Rhode Island, and here's the big one, California. So that puts FDR already at a landslide position. Looking at the 86 remaining electoral votes, it does not matter where they go because it's not going to make that big of a difference on the electoral map. FDR has already won. I mean, looking at this map, it's pretty interesting. Looking at the areas where FDR is excelling in compared to the areas that that Reagan is excelling in. So, again, we're going to go ahead and characterize the states won by FDR by 1%, and that's the state of Iowa. So let's go ahead and put that in the lean column. And the state of Missouri. And these were very, very close races, which means that the rest of these are going to go for Ronald Reagan. That's just how it's going to go. So we're going to go ahead and characterize those now. And obviously those were less than 1% margins for Ronald Reagan. Now here's an interesting one. Actually, the state of Kentucky I do not think was characterized. I probably can figure that one out real quick. But what was interesting was that the state of Massachusetts was actually won by 0.2%. So that's pretty interesting to me because I did not expect that, considering that the state itself is a Democratic state, but a 0.2% margin. Reagan, won here. I mean, it's 0.2%. So obviously, there's like very, very, it's very, it's a very, very small margin. I'll just say that. There's not much else to say about it. So we're gonna go ahead and figure out Kentucky. Kentucky 1936 election results. I really just want to get that characterized and be done with it, because again, it's not crucial to the outcome of this. It's not like it's depending on this. Whoever wins the election is going to win based off Kentucky, but I do think that we should still figure out who it is. FDR wins with 58.5% of the vote here, and we'll see what Ronald Reagan gets. I expect Reagan to probably get more, considering that it was 1984. But again, Democrats did do a little bit better at the time, so 60%. So it still went to Reagan by 0.1%. So not 0.1%, by around 1%. So that one would still be characterized the same. So I do think that's pretty interesting. Looking at this map, Kentucky seems like the only southern, quote unquote, southern state to stay Republican. And again, it was even by a small margin. So looking at the overall election results, again, obviously a blowout for FDR, but that was expected considering looking at his terms, and just looking at the overall support for him nationwide. Obviously, if we took one of his later terms, like the fourth term, it may have been different in a couple of states, but around the same general idea. And Ronald Reagan, with 152 electoral votes, it's not expected for someone who won every state except for one. But again, FDR also won every state except for two. So I do think you have to take that into account. Again, this is not my prediction. This is a stats based only, numbers based only analysis. And that finalizes this video with Ronald Reagan at 155 electoral votes to FDR's 383. Thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to come to the video tomorrow, which will actually be my own opinion about a couple of these states. And yeah, so again, thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.